I stood in my bedroom holding an empty jewelry box, staring at the velvet indentations where my most treasured memories used to live. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments, because what I'm about to tell you will make you want to check your own jewelry box tonight. It was the morning of my late husband Robert's memorial service. 6 months had passed since his funeral, and I'd finally gathered the courage to hold a proper celebration of his life. I wanted to wear my grandmother's engagement ring, the one she'd given me on my wedding day 50 years ago, telling me it would bring me the same happiness it had brought her. The mahogany jewelry box sat open on my dresser, its red velvet compartments gaping empty like wounds. My mother's gold bracelet, gone. The pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 25th anniversary, vanished. Even my grandmother's delicate sapphire earrings, the ones I'd planned to pass down to my granddaughter someday. My hands trembled as I searched through every drawer, every corner of my bedroom. Maybe I'd moved them for safekeeping? Maybe Robert had put them somewhere before he died? But deep in my chest, a cold certainty was settling like winter frost. "Sarah!" I called down the hallway. My daughter had been staying with me for the past month, supposedly to help me adjust to widowhood. She'd been so attentive, so caring, making my meals, handling my correspondence, even organizing my closets. She appeared in my doorway, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater. At 45, Sarah still had that innocent look that had gotten her out of trouble as a child. "What's wrong, Mom? You look upset." "My jewelry," I said, my voice barely steady. "It's all gone. My grandmother's ring, Mother's bracelet, the pearls, everything." Sarah's face crumpled with concern. "Oh no, when did you last see them? Maybe we moved them during the cleaning last week?" But as she spoke, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Sarah had never been able to lie while looking directly at me. Not as a child, not as a teenager, and apparently not now. "These aren't just jewelry, Sarah," I said slowly, watching her face. "This is our family history. Your great-grandmother's ring survived the Depression, 2 world wars, and 3 generations of women who treasured it. The pearls were the last gift your father gave me before his stroke." "Mom, I can't believe you'd accuse me of stealing from you," she snapped, her defensive tone a stark contrast to her concerned expression moments before. "After everything I've done for you, I've put my whole life on hold to take care of you." The shift in her demeanor was so abrupt it left me reeling. This was my daughter, the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she was scared, who called me every Sunday without fail even as an adult. But standing before me now was a stranger wearing Sarah's face. "I'm not accusing anyone," I said carefully. "I'm simply trying to understand what happened to jewelry worth more than most people's cars." "Well, I don't know." Her voice rose to a pitch I hadn't heard since her teenage years. "Maybe someone broke in. Maybe Dad moved them before he died and forgot to tell you. Maybe—" She stopped mid-sentence, her face flushing red. In the silence that followed, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, each second stretching like an eternity. After Sarah stormed out, claiming she needed air, I did something I hadn't done in 30 years. I searched through her belongings. My hands shook as I went through her coat pockets, feeling like a criminal in my own home. In the inside pocket of her winter jacket, my fingers closed around a small piece of paper. "Golden Treasures Pawn Shop. Today's date. A list of items that made my heart stop. 14K gold bracelet with engravings, $180. Pearl necklace, vintage clasp, $300. Diamond ring, antique setting, $400. The total at the bottom read $2,400. I sat on Sarah's bed, the bed in the room where she'd grown up, where I'd read her bedtime stories and kissed away her nightmares, and felt my world tilt on its axis. The paper in my hands was proof of something I couldn't quite comprehend yet. My daughter, my only child, had stolen from me and pawned my most precious possessions for a fraction of their worth. The memorial service would have to wait. I had somewhere else to go first. Golden Treasures Pawn Shop sat squeezed between a laundromat and a tax preparation office on Maple Street, its neon sign flickering weakly in the afternoon sun. I'd driven past this place countless times over the years, never imagining I'd have reason to walk through its doors. "Where are you watching from?" I hope you're somewhere safe, surrounded by people you can trust, because what I discovered next shattered every assumption I had about the people closest to me. The shop smelled of old leather and desperation. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with wedding rings that no longer symbolized eternal love, musical instruments that had lost their songs, and watches that had stopped keeping time for their original owners. Behind the counter stood a man in his mid-50s with kind eyes and graying temples. "Can I help you?" he asked, looking up from a clipboard. "I'm looking for some specific pieces," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Jewelry that might have come in recently." "Mickey Rosenberg," he introduced himself, extending a weathered hand. "What kind of pieces are we talking about?" My throat constricted as I described my treasures. Pieces that had adorned my family's most important M.O. Ments for generations. Mickey's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable as I spoke. "Mrs. Hoffman," I said. "Agnes Hoffman." His face went pale. Oh no." He rubbed his forehead with the palm of his hand. "Your daughter's been coming in twice a month." "Nice lady," said her elderly mother was downsizing. The words hit me like a physical blow. Elderly mother downsizing. Sarah had reduced our family legacy to the sad story of an old woman clearing out clutter. "For how long?" I asked. 8 months, maybe 9. Always apologetic about it, you know. Said it broke her heart to part with family pieces, but that you couldn't bear to see them anymore after your husband passed. 8 months. While I was grieving Robert's death, planning his funeral, learning to live alone for the first time in 50 years, my daughter was systematically looting my jewelry box. Mickey led me to a display case near the back of the store. There, under harsh fluorescent lighting, lay my treasures. My grandmother's engagement ring sparkled mockingly under a price tag reading $1,200. The pearls Robert had surprised me with on our anniversary were draped across black velvet with a $900 sticker. "That pearl necklace?" Mickey said, following my gaze. "Yeah, she got $300. I'm asking $900 for it now. Business is business." He paused, seeming to realize how that sounded. "Look, Mrs. Hoffman, I'm sorry. I run an honest operation here. People bring me items. I give them fair market value based on what I can reasonably sell them for. I never ask too many questions about family situations." "Fair market value," I repeated. "You paid my daughter $2,400 for items you're selling for nearly $7,000. Mickey shifted uncomfortably. "That's how pawn shops work. We take the risk, we need the margin. But listen," he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Your daughter didn't just bring jewelry. There were other things. A silver tea set, some china, a few small antiques. I've got records if you want to see them." The room began to spin. A tea set? China? Those items were still in my dining room, or so I thought. How much had she taken that I hadn't even noticed yet? "You know, Mrs. Agnes," Mickey continued, "between you and me, this place might not be here much longer. The economy's been tough, rent keeps going up, and people are pawning less, buying less. I've been thinking about selling." As he spoke, an idea began forming in my mind. Audacious, impossible, but strangely compelling. I looked around the shop with new eyes, calculating square footage, estimating inventory value, considering location and foot traffic patterns. "How much would something like this cost?" I asked casually. Mickey laughed, but not unkindly. "More than most folks have lying around. But if you're serious, I'd probably take $150,000 for everything. The business, inventory, fixtures, even the customer database." I nodded thoughtfully, memorizing every detail of the shop's layout. "Thank you for your honesty, Mickey. I need to think about what to do next." "Look," he said as I prepared to leave, "I feel terrible about this situation. If you want to buy back any of your pieces, I'll give you the same price I paid your daughter. That's not something I usually do, but this whole thing doesn't sit right with me." I thanked him, but declined. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Robert's death, a sense of purpose. Sarah thought she was dealing with a grieving old woman who wouldn't fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she was. But first, I needed to understand exactly what resources I had at my disposal. It was time to have some serious conversations with people I hadn't spoken to in months. The law office of Klein Morris & Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of downtown's tallest building, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city. Huz. Ward Klein had been Robert's lawyer for over 20 years, handling everything from our wills to business contracts to real estate transactions. "Agnes," Howard said, rising from behind his mahogany desk as his secretary showed me in. "I'm so sorry I haven't called since the funeral. How are you managing? If you're going through something similar, and I know from your comments that many of you are, please subscribe so we can support each other through these difficult stories. Sometimes we don't realize our own strength until someone forces us to find it. I'm discovering I'm stronger than I thought," I said, settling into the leather chair across from him. "Howard, I need to know exactly what Robert left me. Not the summary version you gave me after the funeral. I need details." Howard's gray eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "That depends on what you tell me." He opened a thick file and spread several documents across his desk. "Your husband was very thorough in his planning, Agnes. Very thorough indeed." For the next hour, Howard walked me through finances I'd never fully understood. Robert had always handled our investments, and I'd been content to let him. Now I was learning the extent of his financial acumen. "The life insurance alone came to $350,000, Howard explained. "Then there's the investment portfolio, mostly blue-chip stocks and municipal bonds. Current value is approximately $280,000. The house is worth about $320,000, mortgage-free. And there's the business sale money that's been sitting in CDs. Business sale money? From when Robert sold his engineering firm 5 years ago. He invested the proceeds conservatively, said it was your retirement security. That account has grown to just over $400,000. I sat in stunned silence. Over $1.3 million. Robert and I had lived modestly, never wanting for anything but never living extravagantly. I had no idea we were what most people would consider wealthy. "Mrs. Hoffman, your late husband left you very well provided for. You have options here," Howard continued. "What's prompted this sudden interest in your finances?" I told him everything. Sarah's thefts, the pawn shop, my growing suspicions about what else might be missing. Howard's expression grew increasingly grave as I spoke. "We need to document everything," he said finally. "I'm going to put you in touch with my colleague Margaret Chen. She's a financial advisor who specializes in elder financial abuse cases, and I think we should consider hiring a private investigator." "I don't want revenge, Howard," I said carefully. "I want justice, and I want my mother's ring back." "Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to buy your way out of it," he replied with a meaningful look. Margaret Chen's office was in the same building, 3 floors down. At 50-something, she radiated the kind of competent energy that immediately inspired confidence. After Howard's introduction, she spent 2 hours reviewing my financial situation and creating what she called a liquid assets assessment. "You could access $200,000 immediately without penalties or major tax implications," she explained. "More if needed, though it would take a few days to arrange." "Are you considering a major purchase?" "Possibly," I said. "What do you know about buying small businesses?" Margaret smiled. "More than you might expect. I help clients diversify their portfolios all the time." "What kind of business are we talking about?" When I told her about the pawn shop, her smile widened. "Actually, that's not a bad investment if you know what you're doing. Pawn shops can be quite profitable. They're recession-proof, deal in cash, and the inventory essentially pays for itself. With your liquid assets, you could easily finance such a purchase." She gave me the contact information for Rebecca Torres, a private investigator who specialized in family financial crimes. "Rebecca is discreet but thorough," Margaret said. "If your daughter has been systematically stealing from you, Rebecca will find the evidence you need." By evening, I was back home, looking at Sarah's bedroom door with new eyes. She hadn't returned since our confrontation that morning, which gave me time to think. Robert used to say that the best business decisions were made with complete information. I was going to get that information. Rebecca Torres agreed to meet me the next morning at a coffee shop downtown. Over the phone, her voice was warm but professional. "Mrs. Hoffman, I've handled dozens of cases like this. Family theft is more common than people realize, especially when adult children are facing financial pressure. We'll get to the bottom of what's been happening." That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. For too long, I'd been reactive, letting grief and loneliness make me vulnerable. But tomorrow, I would start taking control of my life again. Sarah still hadn't come home. Rebecca Torres looked nothing like my mental image of a private investigator. In her mid-40s with shoulder-length black hair and wearing a crisp business suit, she could have been a bank manager or real estate agent. We met at Cornerstone Cafe, a quiet place where we could talk without being overheard. "I've been investigating financial crimes for 15 years, Rebecca said, sliding a manila folder across the small table. "Your daughter and son-in-law see you as a bank account, not family. What I found will be difficult to hear." The folder contained photographs, bank records, and a detailed timeline that made my stomach churn. Rebecca had been thorough. Credit reports, social media surveillance, even interviews with neighbors and local business owners. "Sarah's been struggling financially for 2 years, Rebecca explained. Her husband Marcus's construction business failed when that big commercial project fell through. They're $80,000 in credit card debt, behind on their mortgage, and facing bankruptcy. She showed me printouts of Marcus's internet searches from his work computer. Searches about probate law, inheritance rights, and how long it takes to sell an elderly person's house after death. They've been planning this since your husband got sick," Rebecca continued. "Sarah started taking small items first, things she thought you wouldn't notice immediately. When you didn't react, she got bolder. The photographs were the worst part. Rebecca had followed Sarah to 3 different pawn shops across the city. My china cabinet, which I thought was still full, had been systematically emptied. The silver tea service my mother had given me as a wedding gift, gone. Even small decorative items I'd inherited from my grandmother. I found items at 3 different shops. She's been systematic about this," Rebecca said. "The total value of what she's stolen is approximately $25,000, but the pawn shops only paid her about $8,000. I thought about Sarah's tears when her father was dying, how she'd held my hand during his funeral, how grateful I'd been for her support during the darkest period of my life. While I was grieving, she was calculating. There's more," Rebecca said gently. "She's also taken items from other family members. Your sister Ruth noticed some jewelry missing after Sarah visited last month. Your brother-in-law David's missing a watch that belonged to his father." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined possible. This wasn't desperation driving a single bad decision. This was a calculated campaign of theft targeting the elderly members of our family. "The hardest part isn't what she took," I said aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's that she looked me in the eye and lied. She held me while I cried and planned her next theft." Rebecca's expression was compassionate but professional. "I need to ask, what do you want to do with this information? I can provide everything you need for criminal charges, or we can explore other options." I thought about Mickey Rosenberg's struggling pawn shop, about my substantial liquid assets, about the look on Sarah's face when she'd accused me of not trusting her. An idea that had been forming in my mind crystallized into a plan. "I want to buy Golden Treasure's pawn shop," I said. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "That's creative? May I ask why?" "Because then I can legally reclaim everything she stole, plus anything else she might try to pawn in the future. And because I think it's time my daughter learned that her elderly mother is far more resourceful than she assumed." "You'll need legal cover for a purchase like that," Rebecca warned. "And you'll want witnesses to everything that happens afterward." "I have an excellent lawyer," I replied, "and I think the current shop owner might be willing to help once he understands the full situation." That evening, I called Ruth and David to warn them about Sarah's thefts. Both confirmed they'd noticed missing items, but had been too embarrassed to mention it, assuming they'd misplaced things or forgotten where they'd put them. "I feel like such a fool," Ruth said over the phone. "When she offered to help me reorganize my jewelry box last month, I thought she was being sweet." "We all trusted her," I replied. "That's what family is supposed to do, trust each other. But trust, once broken, had to be rebuilt with actions, not words, and Sarah was about to learn that actions have consequences." I spent the next morning reviewing my financing. Al statements one more time, calculating exactly how much liquid cash I could access immediately. Howard had prepared all the legal documents I'd need for a business purchase, and Margaret had confirmed that I could transfer the funds within 24 hours of signing. It was time to have another conversation with Mickey Rosenberg. I arrived at Golden Treasure's pawn shop at 10 minutes before closing time, knowing Mickey would have time to talk without interruptions. The afternoon light streaming through the windows cast long shadows across the displays, making the shop feel more melancholy than usual. "Mrs. Hoffman," Mickey said, looking up from his ledger. "Back to think about buying your pieces?" "Actually, Mickey, I have a business proposition that might surprise you." His pen stopped moving. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "I want to buy this place, but I need your discretion and your expertise." Mickey set down his pen entirely. "You're serious?" "Completely. I can offer you $160,000 cash, with closing within 1 week. I'll need you to stay on as manager. Same salary you're paying yourself now, plus benefits and a percentage of profits." For a long moment, Mickey just stared at me. Then he walked over to his coffee pot and poured 2 cups, adding sugar to both without asking how I liked mine. "Can I ask why?" he said finally. I told him everything. About Sarah's systematic thefts, about the other family members she'd victimized, about my discovery of my own financial resources. Mickey listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. "Jesus," he said when I finished. "I feel sick about this. I never would have bought those items if I'd known." "You did nothing wrong," I assured him. "You run an honest business. But now I'm asking you to help me run it more strategically." Mickey was quiet for several minutes, sipping his coffee and looking around the shop he'd built over 15 years. "You know," he said finally, "I got into this business because I wanted to help people who needed quick cash. But lately, I've been seeing more and more situations like yours. Adult children selling their parents' belongings without permission, people pawning family heirlooms because they're desperate or greedy." "Exactly. We could change that. Implement better verification systems, create protections for elderly clients, maybe even partner with local social services. Consider this an investment in justice with a side of profit," I added, echoing something Howard had said during our meeting. Mickey smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. "I like the sound of that. When do you want to start?" "As soon as the paperwork clears. But Mickey, this arrangement stays between us for now. As far as anyone knows, you're still the owner until I'm ready to reveal otherwise." We shook hands on the deal, and Mickey promised to have his business attorney prepare all the necessary documents. I would officially become the owner of Golden Treasure's pawn shop within 1 week. Driving home, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced since before Robert's illness. For months, I'd been passive, letting life happen to me. Now I was taking control, making moves, planning strategy. Robert would have been proud. But first, I needed to set the stage for what would come next. I spent the evening planning exactly how to invite Sarah for what she would think was a reconciliation conversation. She'd been avoiding me for 3 days since our confrontation, staying at Marcus's sister's house according to a mutual friend. I crafted a text message carefully. "Sarah, I've been thinking about our argument. You're right that I haven't been myself since Dad died. Could we meet for coffee? Tomorrow? I'd like to talk about moving forward." Her response came within minutes. "Yes, Mom. I miss you. Let's meet at Cornerstone Cafe at 2 p.m. Perfect. Cornerstone Cafe was only 2 blocks from Golden Treasures. After our coffee, I would suggest walking to show her something special, a business investment I was considering. She would think I was asking for her advice about how to spend my money. Instead, she was about to learn that her elderly mother had already spent it on the perfect trap. Sarah was already waiting when I arrived at Cornerstone Cafe, her hands wrapped around a large coffee cup as if trying to absorb its warmth. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, and her usual perfect makeup noticeably absent. "Mom," she said, standing to hug me, "I'm so sorry about the other day. I was stressed about Marcus's job situation, and I took it out on you." I hugged her back, noting how thin she'd become. "We both said things we didn't mean, sweetheart." We ordered coffee and pastries, making careful conversation about safe topics, the weather, neighborhood news, plans for Thanksgiving. Sarah seemed relieved that I wasn't pressing about the jewelry, and gradually her natural warmth returned. "I've been thinking about your father's advice," I said after we'd been talking for 20 minutes. "He always said the best way to honor someone's memory is to live fully, not just survive." "That sounds like Dad," Sarah said, smiling genuinely for the first time in days. which is why I've decided to make an investment, something that would give me purpose and maybe help other people too. Sarah leaned forward, interested. What kind of investment? I'd rather show you than tell you. It's just a few blocks from here. Would you walk with me? The afternoon was crisp but sunny, perfect for a stroll through downtown. Sarah chatted about her memories of coming down town with me as a child, how we'd window shop and get ice cream. I let her talk, knowing these might be our last peaceful moments together for a very long time. Golden Treasures looked different with Mickey's new security system installed and the windows freshly cleaned. A small, under new management sign sat discreetly in the corner of the front window. A pawn shop? Sarah asked, confused. Mom, you're not thinking of investing in a pawn shop, are you? Actually, I said, pulling out my keys, I already did. Surprise, Sarah. I bought your favorite shopping destination. The color drained from Sarah's face as I unlocked the door. Mickey looked up from behind the counter, his expression carefully neutral as we entered. Ladies, he said with a slight nod. Sarah stood frozen just inside the doorway, her eyes darting around the shop as if seeing it for the first time, which, in a way, she was. She was seeing it as a daughter whose mother now owned the evidence of her crimes. I don't understand, she whispered. I walked over to the display case where my jewelry gleamed under the lights. This is my grandmother's engagement ring, I said, pointing to the piece with the $1,100 price tag, and these are the pearls your father gave me for our anniversary. Mickey, could you tell us how these items came to be in your shop? Mickey consulted his records. These pieces were brought in by a woman named Sarah Hoffman over the past 8 months, paid a total of $2,400 for items now priced at $6,800. Sarah's legs seemed to give out. She sank into the chair Mickey kept for customers, her face white as paper. Mom, I can explain. Please do, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. Explain how you systematically stole from me while I grieved your father's death. Explain how you told Mickey I was downsizing because I couldn't bear to see these pieces anymore. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. We were desperate. Marcus's business failed, and we were going to lose the house. I thought you had so much, and you never wore most of it anymore. So you decided to sell our family's history to strangers? I was going to buy it all back, she sobbed. As soon as Marcus got another contract, I was going to come here and buy everything back and put it back in your jewelry box. You would never have known. The pain in her voice was real, but so was the betrayal. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger who had calculated the worth of my grief in dollars and cents. I trusted you with my heart, my home, and my memories, I said quietly. You sold them for cash. Mickey shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, but he stayed silent, understanding that this was a family reckoning years in the making. You have 2 choices, I continued. Make this right, or face the consequences legally. I have a private investigator's report documenting everything you've stolen, not just from me, but from Ruth and David too. I have photographs, bank records, and witness statements. Sarah's crying intensified. Please, Mom, I'll do anything. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll work 2 jobs. You'll work here, I said, every weekend for the next year. You'll see what happens when people are forced to sell their treasures because they're desperate. You'll understand what these items meant to their families, and you'll help me build systems to prevent other children from doing to their parents what you did to me. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. You bought this place to punish me? I bought this place to save myself, I replied. The punishment is just a side benefit. Mickey cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Hoffman, should I prepare the paperwork for the return of your items? All of them, I said, and I want a complete inventory of everything Sarah brought in, with photographs and documentation. We're going to make this right, 1 piece at a time. As Sarah sat sobbing in that chair, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, I felt something shift inside me. The grief-stricken widow who had been victimized was gone. In her place stood a woman who owned her own business, controlled her own destiny, and refused to be anyone's victim ever again. The police station felt like stepping into a different world. Fluorescent lights, institutional green walls, and the constant hum of activity. Detective Maria Santos looked up from her desk as Mickey and I approached, my folder of evidence thick in my hands. Mrs. Hoffman, I understand you want to file a report about family theft. For the next 2 hours, I laid out everything. Rebecca's investigation, the pawn shop receipts, the systematic nature of Sarah's thefts. Detective Santos took notes methodically, asking clarifying questions and making copies of all my documentation. This is one of the most thorough cases I've seen, she said finally. Usually family members are reluctant to provide this level of evidence. You understand this will likely result in felony charges. I understand, I said, but I also want my daughter to have a chance to make this right before it goes too far. Detective Santos nodded approvingly. We can arrange a formal restitution agreement as part of a deferred prosecution program. If she complies fully, the charges can be reduced or dropped. If she doesn't, she shrugged meaningfully. That evening, I called a family meeting. Sarah arrived with Marcus, both looking like they hadn't slept in days. Ruth and David came too, along with Howard Klein, to ensure everything was properly documented. You'll work here every weekend until you understand what these items meant to people, I told Sarah as we stood in my newly owned pawn shop after hours. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, making the conversation feel even more serious. Sarah nodded. Miserably. I know I don't deserve another chance. This isn't about punishment, Sarah. It's about understanding the harm you caused. Every weekend, you'll help people who are pawning their possessions out of desperation. You'll see mothers selling wedding rings to pay for groceries, elderly men pawning war medals to afford medication. Maybe then you'll understand what it means to turn family treasures into cash. Marcus started to object. Now wait a minute. You don't get to speak, Ruth interrupted, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. You encouraged this. You researched Mom's finances like she was a mark instead of family. David nodded grimly. We know you looked up property values on her house, Marcus. We know you calculated how much she'd be worth after she dies. Marcus's face flushed red, but he said nothing. Detective Santos had shown me those internet searches. Marcus researching probate law, inheritance rights, even the average life expectancy for women my age. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Sarah will work here weekends for a year, unpaid. She'll also pay back every penny she stole, with interest. The total comes to $27,000, payable at $500 per month for the next 5 years. We don't have $500 a month, Marcus protested. Then you'll find it, Howard said calmly, because the alternative is 5 to 10 years in prison for elder financial abuse. I watched Sarah's face as the reality sank in. For 8 months, she'd seen me as an easy target, a grieving old woman too distracted to notice what was disappearing from her home. Now she was learning that her elderly mother had resources, connections, and a steel backbone she'd never suspected. I'm not just getting my jewelry back, I said, looking directly at her. I'm getting my self-respect back, and you're going to help me build something better than what you tried to destroy. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Running the pawn shop energized me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Mickey and I made an excellent team. His street knowledge combined with my organizational skills and financial resources. We implemented new policies requiring multiple forms of ID for high-value items, and we partnered with local social services to help people find alternatives to pawning family heirlooms. Sarah fulfilled her weekend obligation without complaint, though I could see the work was difficult for her emotionally. Watching desperate people sell their treasures forced her to confront what she'd done to me. Gradually, something in her face began to change. Shame replacing defiance. Understanding replacing entitlement. The broader family consequences were swift and decisive. Ruth and David cut all contact with Marcus, though they maintained hope for eventual reconciliation with Sarah. My nephew canceled Marcus's landscaping contract. Word spread through our social circles, and Marcus found himself persona non grata at family gatherings and community events. But for me, the most surprising development was how much I enjoyed being a businesswoman. Every morning when I unlocked the shop, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since Robert's death. I was helping people, building something valuable, and proving to myself that life after 70 could be about more than just surviving. 6 months after buying Golden Treasures, I stood behind the counter reviewing our quarterly profit reports. The business had exceeded all expectations, partly due to Mickey's expertise, partly due to my insistence on treating customers with dignity rather than desperation. Sarah appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of coffee from the shop next door. Her weekend work requirement had ended the month before, but she'd continued coming in voluntarily, helping elderly customers and learning the business. "The Hendersons wanted to thank you again," she said, setting a cup on the counter. "When you connected them with that estate jewelry appraiser, instead of letting them pawn their grandmother's ring, they discovered it was worth 10 times what we would have paid." I smiled, remembering the elderly couple who'd been about to sell a family heirloom to pay for car repairs. Instead of taking advantage of their desperation, we'd helped them get a proper appraisal and connected them with a collector who paid them fairly. "That's what we're here for," I said. "Sometimes the best business decision is the one that helps people avoid doing business with you." Sarah nodded, sipping her coffee. "Mom, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to earn your trust back. Working here has shown me—" She paused, struggling for words. "I never understood what these things meant to people. They're not just objects, they're connections to the people they loved." I studied my daughter's face. The entitled, desperate woman who had pawned my grandmother's ring was gone. In her place was someone who seemed genuinely changed by witnessing the stories behind every pawned possession. "Trust is earned through actions, not words," I said. "But I'm willing to see what you do with this second chance." The bell above the door chimed, and Mickey walked in carrying a clipboard and grinning broadly. "Ladies, you're not going to believe this. The City Council approved our proposal for the Senior Financial Protection Program. We're getting a $50,000 grant to expand our verification systems and create educational workshops." I felt a surge of pride. Our program would help other elderly residents avoid becoming victims of financial abuse, whether from strangers or family members. We'd built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. "There's more," Mickey continued. "Channel 7 wants to do a feature story about the program. They're calling it From Victim to Victor, How One Woman Turned Personal Tragedy into Community Service." I laughed, shaking my head. I never thought being betrayed would lead me to find myself again. That evening, after Mickey and Sarah had gone home, I walked through the shop one more time before locking up. The displays were organized, the paperwork was current, and tomorrow's appointments were scheduled. This space that had once represented my daughter's betrayal had become something entirely different, a symbol of resilience, second chances, and the power of refusing to remain a victim. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. "Saw the news about your program. Dad would be so proud of what you've built." She was right. Robert had always believed that the best response to adversity was to create something positive from it. He would have loved seeing me run a business, advocate for elderly protection, and transform a personal betrayal into community service. As I turned off the lights and locked the door, I reflected on everything that had changed in less than a year. My daughter had stolen my jewelry and pawned it, thinking she was taking advantage of a weak old woman. Instead, she'd awakened something in me I didn't know existed, the strength to fight back, the wisdom to turn pain into purpose, and the determination to never be anyone's victim again. I learned that being underestimated can be your greatest advantage. When people think you're just a grieving old woman, they forget you've had decades to develop wisdom, connections, and resources. My daughter stole my jewelry, but in fighting to get it back, I found something far more valuable: my own power. Now I run a business, employ people, and help other seniors who've been taken advantage of. The best part? Every morning, when I unlock that shop, I'm reminded that it's never too late to take control of your story. Sometimes the best revenge is building something better than what you lost. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've made it this far, please subscribe and share your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by family members? Have you found strength you didn't know you had? Your voice matters, and sharing your story might help someone else find their power too. Remember, you're stronger than you know, and it's never too late to write a new chapter in your life.